doing. Let's see. So you'll see in the bowl here, and it may not always be a perfect view for you, but I have some brown sugar and butter, and we're gonna cream that together because like any good coffee cake or cake, generally you need to get that sugar and butter mixed together.
Becky, can you hear me?
Okay, unmuted. Sorry about that, everyone. I exited the meeting when I was agreeing to be filmed. So trying to do things. Let me start the, let's spotlight me again. Okay, let's move on to creaming our, our sugar and our butter. So what we want to do once it's getting a little creamed, we're going to put in our eggs. One at a time. All right, so once we have that creamed, we're gonna add in a little bit of vanilla. So right now it looks like your, kind of typical coffee cake. We have some butter, we have some brown sugar, but what we're gonna be doing is now we're gonna be playing with adding some healthier options so that it's not a complete sugar fat sort of breakfast food. So what we have, and I don't know if many of you ever use this, we're using some whole wheat flour. So I'm gonna tilt this up for a quick second so you can see me. So we're doing some whole wheat pastry flour. The reason I'm choosing pastry flour is it's a little bit finer ground. So when you're trying to replace some of the regular white flour that's in your food, it's not gonna taste as gritty. So getting a whole wheat pastry flour, there's also, if you go to the grocery store, you'll see there's different types of whole wheat flours. There's even white whole wheat flour, which is just a different type of whole wheat. It's not all-purpose flour. Oh, wow, Sam's got something going here. Not all-purpose flour, but it is giving us a good option of being able to add some more of those whole grains that we're always talking about so that we can get a better balance of what we need in our diet that's going to be offering more dietary fiber. So in my bowl, I've already mixed together all my dry ingredients. I have a cup of all-purpose flour, 3/4 of a cup of whole wheat flour. We also have our baking soda, baking powder. And then what makes this a really, really nice option for winter is that we are doing a mix of spices. So your traditional spice is going to be more cinnamon. Now we're adding nutmeg, ground cloves. We're adding all these nice deep dark spices that we're pulling a lot more flavor out of this food. So we'll mix that in. And then we're going to go back and forth between adding in our whole wheat and whole wheat flour and spices. And then we're also going to add in some sour, I picked light sour cream. That's going to add some more moisture. Mix in some, you can use low fat or non-fat sour cream. There's a lot of moisture in this cake, so either one works fine. Get this in. So it's not a lot. It's only a third of a cup of low-fat sour cream. If you want, or you don't have sour cream in your house, you could also just use like plain yogurt, which would taste fine. Once we have this all mixed together, now is when we start adding in our zucchini. Now the recipe calls for about 2.5 cups of zucchini. So, medium zucchini, about 2 of these. You don't have to be, too stringent about weighing it and trying to figure that out, but you're looking for 2 of those. And what I did ahead of time is I shredded it with my cheese grater, so that you get a nice, nice thready mix like this. There's no need to actually worry about peeling the zucchini. The flavor is really good. This is not the first time I've made this, so I can attest that it turns out really well. So we'll get this out. We're gonna move our mixer out of the way, which will free up a little space on my countertop. Now, pull it back this way. We're going to put our zucchini in. When I did the dry run with this, I just shredded up the zucchini, I threw it in a bowl, and then I mixed it in and cooked it. And the one thing I found is that if you go right from just getting, zucchinis have a lot of moisture in them. So if you want to shorten up your cooking time a little bit, and the cooking time I'm giving you is roughly, 40-45 minutes, but you always have to check. It's always a little different based on the oven or how much moisture that you have in your mix here. But the great thing with the zucchini is that because we're adding this, we don't have to add extra oil. We don't need to add, extra butters for, other than our first, 1/4 cup of butter that we creamed in. And you can see you have a lot of moisture here, which is great. If you wanted to and you prefer, you could even add some nuts to it, which is fine. Go with whatever your preference is. It'll add a nice texture. And to make it pretty, we want to think about doing a bundt pan, something that's going to be a little nicer, setting it out to serve it. In your directions, we told you that you want to put some, oil on your pan and then flour it. If you want to make your life easier, you could get like the Pam cooking spray that already has flour in it. It's made for baking. If you do not use a version with flour, it's going to stick into your pan, and then it just won't look quite as pretty when you're going to serve it. There is a bit of a crumble topping that adds a little bit more fiber and also a little bit of sweetness. In this crumble topping, we actually have, I mixed it ahead because you're already watching me mix enough things, but we have a little brown sugar. We also have some quick oats in here. And you want to stick with the quick oats versus the old-fashioned oats. You're really looking for kind of these 1-minute quick oats. Because it is a nice fine grain, it's going to be a lot easier to incorporate into your mix versus doing a wonderful whole grain oat, but it's just too thick. It's too heavy. It's not going to get quite as moist because the grain is a little too solid. Now, sometimes I happen to have the quick oats, but I didn't have quite as many as I wanted. So when I was doing this and demoing early and mixing things together, I took some of my my regular whole oats and I threw them in my mini food processor, and that way you could chop it up. So if you don't want to buy a separate canister of the quick oats, you can always just use a little food prep, chop it up in the food processor, and then it will be tender enough and small enough that you're going to be able to get a nice, nice little mixture. This is just a nice crumble topping that's going to be on top once you flip your cake over. So brown sugar, a little bit of butter, it's got the oats in it, and more cinnamon. So if you like extra crumble, and I think that was the consensus with my family, because they get to taste everything that I make before I do the final product. So just a little bit more crumble topping. So we have that in there. Then we're just going to pour our zucchini mixture in here. Mix it all around, and then we can throw it in the oven. Sam can say I actually had her try it too. So she can give you her 2 cents, but I think this had a very nice flavor that doesn't taste gritty. It doesn't taste like it's heavy on, the grains with the whole wheat flour. It still has a balance of some of the white flour so that you're not missing out on that tenderness completely, but you're getting a nice texture between the whole grain flour and then also having the zucchini in there. So show you what the final product looks like. Sorry, trying to set my timer over there. My oven's fighting me. So when I worked ahead with these, you could also make mini versions. So I have these little mini bundt pans, which make it nice if you're going to be, bringing it to people and they can pick it up. You can also just add a little bit of a flair, make it a little prettier, add in a bit of powdered sugar just for show. You want to use a little bit of a sift. And it is ready. And you have a nice, either for tea or coffee in the afternoon or for breakfast in the morning, a good tasting and also healthier version of a coffee cake. So we're going to move on to our next item. And this is going to be, we are doing a cheesecake. The nice thing with cheesecake is it is lower in some of the added sugars. So we can get a great flavor without having to go heavy-handed as far as our sugar. I did a twist on this. We have this. Instead of using your traditional graham cracker crust, and I tried 2 different ways of approaching this. We had an option to do, oats with, I believe it was pecans and a little brown sugar, and pulsing that up in a mini food processor and then baking it. Or option 2 was using almond flour. Almond flour has a nice texture. Grab my almond flour. Very similar in textures if you were using like a whole grain flour, but it's actually just milled almonds. There's no flour in it. It's, just a great way of getting some nuts, some omega-3s, healthy fats in here, and taking out more flour, more extra sugar so that you could have a nice healthy crust. So I already mixed ahead, and we took our almond flour. We mixed it with a little bit of cinnamon, because you have to have cinnamon. Mix it with cinnamon. You have to, melt a little bit of butter. You could always use a butter that's blended with canola oil, so you can cut down on some of the saturated fats. And then you can mix it together until it makes a sandy texture. Once you have that sandy texture, you're just taking, roughly not quite a tablespoon. It depends exactly how big your little muffin tins are. Mine are pretty small, they're like minis, which is nice because if you're going to share a treat with somebody, having these mini ones is a great option so that even if you are getting something that has a little more, has sugar, it does have some sugar and it's not completely sugar-free. We have some brown sugar in the crust, but it's giving you a portion control size. So whenever you can have a smaller portion, it helps a lot. So you're going to take that almond flour and brown sugar and you're going to press it into each of your mini cups. Then you put in the oven at 350 and you're just letting it bake for about 5 minutes. Help stiffen it up a little bit so that it's ready to put the cheesecake in it. One important thing to do if you're ever working with cheesecake, make sure that all the ingredients you're using are at room temperature. I tried to put it together really quick the other day. I did a quick, I always want to see if this is something I want to be doing for the class. So I put together a quick option with, all the ingredients, but the first time I did this, I was not patient and I did not allow everything to be at room temperature. And it does get a little bit more clumpy. You can tell when you're mixing together your ingredients, it's not as smooth as you would like it to be. So warm it up, it's going to get really smooth. And I also had initially used a hand mixer, but it doesn't get quite as smooth as if you use, if you have a food processor and you're using, the metal blade that's reaching all the way across, it's much quicker and it's going to get a lot smoother. Now I'm doing just a smaller, you're usually the recipe I sent you, you're going to be doing entire brick of low fat. You want to do low fat cream cheese. It could be a third, only a third of the fat, half the fat, but try not to do completely fat free because it might throw the texture off a little bit. But you want to do your low fat cream cheese. This is fat free Greek yogurt, plain. There's no flavor. If you, prefer to have, maybe if you have a plain, a vanilla yogurt, something like that in the house, you could use that. You just would cut down on the sweetener that you'd be adding, because for sweetness, I'm going to be using honey. So about a third of a cup or a quarter of a cup of honey. Since this is a smaller batch that I'm doing now, it's just 2 tablespoons, but we'll squeeze it in. It doesn't have to be super rigorous. You're just adding it for sweetness. It's not going to change the structure. It's about 2 tablespoons. And then 1 egg white. So I've already broken our egg. Throw that in. And a touch of vanilla. So do a little vanilla extract. All right. So this is where it is totally worthwhile for having your big food processor that you may only bring out at the holidays, because it makes this super quick. I'll go in here. And we have a nice, I'm going to blend it up a little. 2 little pieces of cream cheese still in here. Done with our food processor. Set this out of the way. You'll see, got our blade. We get a nice smooth texture of the cream cheese and the Greek yogurt and the eggs. There are some no-bake versions that don't have an egg in it. If you prefer to do that, I like the texture a little bit better, especially being able to swirl in like a little bit of flavor at the end when we have the egg. So that's the reason this recipe has the egg white. We'll grab our prepared little tins again. And then this is the easy part. It's roughly about a tablespoon or less that you're scooping in You know, I'm just pretty much filled to the top of the cup and kind of spread it around. So you're getting a good even fill on each of your cups. And to make this a little bit more holiday, you know, we want to have something, you know, have a little bit of color, have something that's a little bright, make it more interesting than just plain old white cheesecake. But you can customize it. And when you're doing mini bites, you could switch it around and do a couple different flavors if you wanted to. I'm going to be using a cranberry sauce so that you get that bright red color. If you want to use like little mini chocolate chips, because someone, you know, in your family or you like some chocolate, you could do that. If you just want to leave it plain and do maybe a little sprinkle of cinnamon on top and serve it with some, you know, like a little mint leaf, just something for a little splash of color, you could pretty much take it any direction you want. And outside of the holidays, any other fruit works well. So we have all our little cups filled. For the recipe I did, this holds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is a 24, it has 24 cups. It makes roughly found about, you know, 12 to 14 cups, depending on, you know, sorry for the half recipe right now. That's why there's a little bit less. And now we get the fun part. We're going to do our cranberry. Now, if you want to make cranberry from scratch, more power to you. I just grabbed a cranberry sauce that's from Trader Joe's that's jarred. It's a little looser. It's not like the big thick can that you might pull out at Thanksgiving to have with turkey that holds its shape. This one's a little thinner. It has some nice flavors in it. And we're going to swirl this in. Use a little spoon, and you just need like a little drop. You know, with this, there's some bigger pieces of cranberry, there's some small stuff, so it's whatever you like. So you just need pretty much like a little dollop. Don't have to sit and measure it. You don't need to get a teaspoon. You're gonna plop it on here, and then we're going to swirl it so that it gets that festive color all over. Pull this one. It's a little bit more fibers than I would like. Now, for anyone who's going to our potluck tomorrow, you get to try some of these foods, which is nice because since COVID started, I make all this food and I never give it to anyone except my family. So it's nice to have other people be able to try the things that we're making and see, did it really taste good, or is she just saying that because she's on video? Where are my toothpicks? Oh, they're there. So just grab a little toothpick and just go swirl it in a little bit. You get that color distributed. And it doesn't, since there are mini cheesecakes, it does not take very long to cook these. You know, depending on how thick you put your cream cheese filling in here. I think, you know, I'd said on the instructions about 10 to 12 minutes. Since I fill it to the top, you know, what you want to do is make sure it's firm to the touch. So depending on the batch that I did, I had a couple, I went, you know, 1 or 2 minutes longer. So up to about 14, even 15 minutes if you feel like it's not firm, but then take it out and you're going to chill it in the refrigerator. So we'll stick this over here to go in the oven. Then you get to see what the finished product will look like. You know, it is very helpful to have the muffin line, the tin liners, because when I first did it and I didn't have the mini ones, they kind of fall apart as you're trying to pull them out to stick them in the fridge. But you get nice division of your crumb bottom, that is the almond flour, and then your sour cream on top. And just keep them in the fridge. Allow them to be in the refrigerator for at least 2 hours to make sure they're completely set. And then you're able to serve them to your family. So 2 things down. The next thing I was doing was reinventing a cake that my grandmother used to make all the time. Now, since we are already mixing a lot of things, I don't want you to watch me mix yet another thing, but I wanted to, for all of you who might have a favorite old recipe, and this is my grandmother's church cookbook back from the 80s. So you flip through it, it's got some recipes that we've done for years. And this happened to be my brother's favorite cake to have on his birthday. It's a mandarin orange cake. The reason I picked this is it's a nice thing for adding a lot of flavor, but we could also adjust it. In the old recipe, this cake would be called a blended cake. All you're doing is mixing your flour, your sugar, mandarin oranges, some vanilla extract, an egg, throw everything into the bowl, mix it up. And it calls for a whole cup of sugar. When you are doing blended cakes, you can reduce it. Most foods that we make or desserts that we make could actually do with less sugar. So I did a little research because I'm not a pastry chef, but went to the King Arthur Flour website, since figured they're the authorities when it comes to baking, and they had a great blog section. And what they did is they did have a pastry chef who went through and told you, what are the best ways to adjust these things so that you're getting, still some sweetness, but a little bit less, doing a little twist on something that's an old family favorite. So with blended cakes, because it's using oranges, it has mandarin oranges. So you're literally just getting a can of mandarin oranges in its own juice. It's not sweetened with anything else. This one's actually in mandarin orange juice. You're going to drain it. So it adds a lot of moisture already, and it adds natural sweetness. So with blended cakes like that, apple cake, if you're doing anything that's got fruit in it, you can decrease up to 50%. So I took the cake and cut it down to only half a cup of sugar, and then took the 1 cup of white flour and added my whole grain pastry flour. So we went back to using pastry flour, did half a cup of this and half a cup of our other flour, the regular all-purpose flour, and then use some of the juice in here in order to add a little extra sweetness instead of just using all extract. You can see the cake, it rose, it has like a nice moisture, it's not stiff at all. It's, to finish it off, when I bring it in tomorrow, it's going to have a little bit of a glaze that's some brown sugar with a little bit of milk in it and some more of the reserved mandarin orange juice. So it took something that went from being really sweet, and I recall it being super sweet when I was a kid, and part of the reason my brother liked it, but I was able to adjust this and make it, a little more whole grain, cut down on the extra sugar, and turn it into something that's an old favorite, but a slightly healthier version of it. So on to our savory foods, because you can't do everything that's sweet. Sometimes you want to have something that's a little bit more on the, spice side. So we're doing some stuffed mushroom caps, and we're making it 3 ingredients. Who doesn't like a 3-ingredient option so that you're not stuck, in the kitchen all day? We want to make it fast. We want to make it easy. So if you have people coming over, you've already been prepping everything else, this is going to be your mushroom caps. These are baby bellas. You could also just use white mushrooms, whichever one you like. You want to make sure you clean it, and then you're removing the stem. We're not going to use it in this recipe. And, I'll take like the little membrane out so that we have a little more room to fit everything in. Then it's our panko breadcrumbs, 1/3 of a cup of panko breadcrumbs. And now we're adding in, make this easy, we have a jarred pesto. So with the jarred pesto, makes it fast. Now, if you're like, I really would rather make it from scratch, I don't want to use a jarred pesto, feel free to email me, because I do have a pesto recipe that we did when we were doing our 4-leaf clover pasta. And I can send you that pesto recipe, and you could make your own from scratch. But in a pinch for this one, if you want to add this in, all you're doing is adding your panko and your pesto, mix it up. Now, to make this taste, give it a little bit more pop, anytime you have a pesto, it's going to have, most time Parmesan cheese is in here. Parmesan cheese, olive oil, either has basil, it's going to have a green leaf in it. Usually it's going to be basil if you can find fresh oregano, but you're just mixing this up to get it to a little bit of a crumb texture. And then from there, you're just going to pile it into your mushroom caps. You want to fill them up. Depending on how much you're making, you can fill up to about 12 caps. And I found that when you buy the bigger container of mushrooms, like, it's about a 10-ounce package, that usually has about 10 to 12 mushroom caps in it. So you don't need to buy a huge quantity. So I'll throw this together. And here we go. One more. And to make it, bump up the flavor just a little bit, using fresh Parmesan or Romano cheese is going to bring out the flavor. You already have a little bit of the cheese that's in there. It will help bump that up a little bit and make it taste fresher. Do not, if you're using, in these two recipes, we have Parmesan or Romano with our next savory one too. So you want to get something that's a little, either buy your own container, something that's a little more fresh grated, so that it's not like the old Kraft, the big green jar. If you guys have that, if you go to Costco, they have the gigantic green jar. And there is a difference, because if you're going with some of the process, like the Kraft, not want to do a dig on Kraft, but when I was doing a sample and used it, because I have a giant container in the fridge that my husband bought, and I thought, I'll just try this. The flavor just was very flat. So spending a little bit more, having the right kind of cheese does make a difference. You're going to taste the difference in it. The Romano is a little bit more intense flavor than Parmesan. So you can mix or match. And all this does, you put it in the oven at 350 for about 18 to 20 minutes, just so it gets tender. And once it is done cooking, then you get your nice little mushroom caps, you get a toast on your Romano or Parmesan cheese, whatever you've used on top, and it has a good flavor and something that is going to be healthier if you're like, I don't want to be eating sweets this whole party, or when I have guests over. At least this is a good way of getting some vegetables in here, getting some fresh herbs and spices, and keeping the calories and the fat a little bit lower. The last thing that we're going to make are mini chicken meatballs. So when you are using any sort of ground meats, like doing ground chicken, ground turkey, anyone who is at my food label reading, what is it? Ask Becky, that was about a couple months ago. There is a difference, if you just get ground chicken, ground turkey, generally the fat is higher because they are using the skin, they're using the white and the dark meat. It's kind of has everything mixed in. To get a lighter flavor and get a lower fat product, I will look for the chicken breast. You can have varying levels. This one that I got at Whole Foods, ground chicken, it's about 96% lean. So doing, anywhere from 94 to 96% lean gives you a little bit more tenderness to it. We're adding in our breadcrumbs because we need something to hold moisture in here when we're cooking it. Like anytime you do a meatball, you have to have some breadcrumbs. So I like panko because it adds a nice little crispness to it. If you just want to use whole wheat breadcrumbs, you could do that. Does not have to be panko. We're doing our Parmesan cheese in here because we're giving it a twist that's a little bit more Italian. On the recipe I sent you, it has, doing onion powder and garlic powder. So I threw in onion powder, but I added in fresh garlic because I wanted on this round to punch up the flavor a little bit more. I like the flavor of garlic, so I'm playing with the fresh, but you could do the powders and throwing in a little seasoning, to add that. If you do not use salt, I will highly recommend If you go, you know, there's a lot of different things like Mrs. Dash, there's herb blends, but this is one of my favorites. It's from Trader Joe's. It's called 21 Seasoning Salute. I'll put it down here too, you guys can see it. It has 21 different herbs and spices, but no sodium in it. It's a great flavor. I add it to a lot of the foods that I do at home, a lot of vegetables, chicken, always on broccoli. It's a big hit. So that. Also, I threw in a little bit of sage because, you know, to round out the flavor, adding in some sage helps. So make sure that we get that moisture. We're going to add 1 egg in here, the 1 whole egg, and then a little bit, like 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Because the olive oil is going to put some of the fat in that we want, but giving us an unsaturated fat. So I'm trying to measure it. I have a little half tablespoon here. All right. So got our, then you're just mixing it up. Now I've used in different recipes, you know, doing the same type of ground chicken. I use it to make a ground chicken burger that's really good, that keeps the fat down. So if you're trying to eat, you know, keeping calories not too heavy, keeping things a little bit more heart healthy, these are good ways of keeping unsaturated fats, but also adding in, you know, different ingredients that help hold the moisture in so that this still has a lot of flavor and doesn't taste dried out. So now you could do mini meatballs, which is what I'm going to do because I like to have a little small portion size. Or you could do, you know, some bigger meatballs. I like using my pastry scoops, and I don't know if anyone uses these very often. These are, you know, used for cookies often. So this is a nice little scoop for doing the mini size. You know, there's a bunch of different sizes. I believe the one that I have is about a tablespoon's worth, maybe a little bit less. If you don't have it, just grab a spoon out of your drawer and you can measure it out. So you're going to take your scoop, pull this over a little bit. You're going to scoop it, pop it in your hands. It's nice if you've got some sort of gloves so you're not touching, you know, the chicken over and over and over again. You can overfill it a little bit to make the meatball a little bit bigger. And then we are just going to line our pan so that we're going to get, you can get, I believe, up to about 30 meatballs. It just depends how big you're going to be making them or how small. So you want to watch them though, because if you're doing a smaller meatball, you're going to be checking on it to make sure you don't completely dry them out. These ones are baked in the oven so that you don't have to sit in a pan and move them around. You can just throw them in there, kind of set it and forget it for about, I believe it's about 20 minutes. You know, chicken, I'm always checking. I never want to undercook it. No one ever wants you to undercook it. But I also, depending on how you're serving it, you might be able to hold a little more moisture. So if I'm going to be doing this for a party, you know, if I'm taking them right out of the oven, put them on a tray, you know, grab some toothpicks, people can grab it. You can do a nice little dipping sauce. The way I'm going to utilize them when we do our potluck tomorrow is I'm actually going to put them in a tomato sauce so that you're playing with those Italian flavors, but I can stick it into a nice little crock pot warming dish and I don't have to worry about heating or them getting dried out as they're sitting out. So once you have these all lined up, you're able to stick them in the oven. Move this. I'm slowly running out of space in my house. There's not so many places to put things. So when they're done, you're going to take them out. They actually are, you know, these are the small, about a tablespoon size. They've been baked for about 20 minutes. Halfway through, I went through and flipped them over just because you'll obviously get a little bit more browned on the side that's making contact with the pan. Flip it over and then it gets a nice even brown. And then, you know, in the morning you can cook them ahead, heat them up. I will throw it into my little crock pot and then it's ready to go. So we're gonna flip this up. So let's look at all the different foods we put together for today. We have our little, you know, zucchini bundt cakes, or what's going to be a bigger bundt cake when we finish the one that we put together here. Be nice, high in fiber, lower in fat, adding that healthy vegetable in there that a lot of us just don't get quite enough of. We have our mini cheesecakes where we're able to cut down on the fat by using reduced fat cream cheese, you know, 0% fat in our Greek yogurt, and then using more of a natural sweetener with our honey, and then adding that to our almond flour crust so that we could get, you know, a little twist that maybe cuts out some of the refined grains that we often would find like in a pastry shell. We, you know, switching over to our savory, we have our mandarin orange cake. Sorry, finish our sweet. Got our mandarin orange cake that's ready to be sliced, and oranges are always a great thing year round, even at the holidays, because you have a lot of good citrus to be able to bring this out as a dessert at night, or even using it maybe like a little luncheon. For our savory foods, we have our stuffed mushroom caps that, you know, took all of, you guys are sitting here, it took just a few minutes to mix together our 2 ingredients and put it in our 3rd ingredient. Probably took me longer to clean the mushrooms and de-stem them. And then we have our mini chicken meatballs that we can use either with a dipping sauce, or we can add it into a tomato sauce and be able to use it more as like an Italian dish. So this is the point where I turn to you guys and I ask if anyone has any questions. 5 holiday meals, 5 holiday treats, hopefully things you'll try, but is there anything that you guys wanted to ask me? It's a quiet crowd tonight. I have one chat. I'll look at here. No. So no questions. You all are, you know, if there's nothing more that I can say for all of you, I hope if we get to see you tomorrow at the potluck, that'll be wonderful. If we don't, I wish you all, you know, having some happy holidays coming up. Try one of these things, try all 5, not in the same day. It's too much. Your house will fall apart. Even my daughter walked in today and said, whoa, there's a lot going on in here. So I'm really glad that you could join me tonight. You could be in my kitchen with me, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your holiday season. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Becky. That was great.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank
Becky.
you.
Thank you.
Becky.
Thank you. You guys have a good holiday. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you, Sam, for figuring out the side-by-side. You're awesome.
No problem. Hope to see you guys tomorrow.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.